When veterans return to civilian life, they deserve your recognition and support. You can help put vets to work by donating your car, truck, or van to Patriotic Hearts. Your donation will directly support programs to help vets find jobs or even start their own business. Donate today for fast, free pickup of your vehicle, running or not. Call 800-209-3485. 800-209-3485. 800-209-3485.
Sponsored by Patriotic Hearts.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
The following program, Collaboraction Radio, is sponsored by Collaboraction, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of NewsWeb Radio Company or its management.
Welcome to Collaboraction Radio at the intersection of art, activism, and social change, and hip-hop.
That was the sounds of DJ Lady D getting us, that's our call to the world to let all of the historians and activists and artists and weirdos know that we're coming together here at 4 p.m. Central Time and in the future on your podcast whenever you're listening to this. Thank you for joining us here at Collaboration Radio on WCPT 820 AM, Chicago's progressive talk radio. And we're also streaming live on Facebook right now. Streaming. And on WCPT.com and YouTube. And, you know, you can get us where you get your podcasts. This is our 15th
I
episode.
Still cannot believe that we've done this 15 times already.
Time flies when you're you know, talking about what's going on in the world and what we're going to do about it.
Well, hey, my name is Carla Stillwell, and it's me and my cough drop. Thank you, long haul COVID, for this lung issue that I have.
So if you do swallow your cough drop and you need a Heimlich.
Dilla, I hope that you are CPR ready, because I almost choked on the show.
I call myself the Forrest Gump of Chicago history just because of all the historical things I've tripped upon, and one of them being I was a lifeguard in this city for like 10 straight summers, so I know CPR, I know the Heimlich. In fact, I've actually performed CPR on like 2 people before and brought them back to from the other side before, so what the CPR I learned was 2 breaths and 15 compressions. I think the thing is switched, but I'll get you back.
Thank you.
We got Sherman Dilla Thomas on the show with us today. Yes. Who seems to have lived so many lives inside of your one life here. We're going to unravel some of your story and talk about Chicago's story. And life is like a box of breath mints for Carla Stillwell.
Yes, a box of Ricola for me. Collaboration Radio is sponsored by the Joseph and Bessie Feinberg Foundation and donors and members like who? Like you. Email radio@collaboration.org or go to our website at www.collaboration.org to learn more.
Yeah, or you can just think about us before you go to bed every night and manifest Collaboration in your life. Like our friends over at AV Chicago, this program is sponsored by AV Chicago, Chicago's leading provider of AV production and event management services. If you want really smart tech nerds who have good gear and take care of your event, go to AV Chicago.
We would be remiss if we did not let you know that the man with the greatest hair in radio, Henry, is our engineer.
Great head of hair.
It is amazing. And the lady with the greatest pipes in Chicago is visiting us today. The Sandra Delgado is in the studio being chill and pretty.
In general, the hair game in the studio today is maybe as good as it's ever been.
Like, dead. Like, for real. Like, this hair game is on point. I used a new product. I hope you all can see it. My curls are curling.
Collaboraction is a 27-year-old nonprofit, and we build knowledge, empathy, dialogue, and action to bring people together and make Chicago a little better place. We do that through live theater and film and radio as well. We leverage the power of storytelling and community to cultivate positive social change. This is our 15th show. Last show was really great. I really think we're on a roll.
Yeah.
And we had Johannes LaCour on last week and Jamie Calvin from the Invisible Institute.
Jamie Calvin dropped the greatest gem ever. He is the reporter that helped break the Laquan McDonald case and was very instrumental in the 16 Shots documentary. And we asked him about how he got to the core of this. And he says, well, someone in law enforcement told me that these tapes and all this stuff existed. And I said, you mean somebody at CPD? And he said, someone in law enforcement. And I said, oh, what? Because...
What does that mean?
Like, what does that mean?
Who was it then? If it wasn't a police officer.
It was somebody super high up. Somebody super high up had some guts. At least enough guts to drop it to the press.
I watched 16 Shots after the interview, and it was one of those things where, you know, I took our then 9-year-old daughter to Michigan Avenue to march for Laquan on, I think it was Black Friday. Mm-hmm. I have put some good time thinking about it theatrically, thinking about it as a person, thinking about his family, and I saw 16 Shots there on Showtime, and I was like, it just felt like work a little bit. You know, sometimes you just, at the end of the day, you want to watch something that's like not so heavy and intellectual and and it was real. I 5 minutes into it, I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this whole thing. And I'm really glad that I did, and I encourage people to go check it out because it was a wild time in our city, and you know, the Invisible Institute is just doing really special things, making things visible. Mm-hmm. I try my hardest not to be political or endorse one because I work for the local light company here, and in the new role that I'm in, I'll get fired because I signed an agreement saying I wouldn't endorse people, and I got 7 crumb snatchers that all need me for medical benefits. But with that said, now that the previous election is over with, I was itching for someone to ask the guy that ran against the guy that won, how long would it have taken you to release that video if you saw it? And no one asked him, right? No news correspondent or journalist asked him, and I thought that that answer would have told us so much, right? And I think it should be an answer for every politician that runs for mayor in this city going forward. Like, how long would it have taken you to release that footage once you saw it? And how they dance around that answer, or how they answer it if they answer it at all, will tell us everything we need to know. You could also ask him if there was big protests in the downtown area, and would you put the bridges up?
I was just going to mention that the bridges were the city was literally divided.
Next week, we have, I will be out of town. I'm going to be down at Austin City Limits, emceeing the kids stage, Austin Kitty Limits. And Dr. Marcus will be here next week with Carla. And then Sandra Delgado company member, founding company member, board member, will be in co-hosting the show on the 14th of October, which we're very excited about. We do have Sandra has an announcement later this week, so stay close to social media. If you like the experience of Sandra Delgado, there might be more of that coming out in the near future. She just back in Chicago recently performed at Joe's Pub at the Public Theater in New York City, and we're really excited to have her in the studio. And if you didn't know, that's my wife. The Utopian Ball is November 11th. Dilla, we hope you'll come as our guest to the gala on November 11th. It's a Saturday if you can make it. It'll be a party, and
the drinks are free.
The food is really good too.
The food is phenomenal.
It better be.
But the bar will be open.
At some point, we figured out like the more you spend on the food and the drinks, the more people are willing to give. It's really silly, but like a 20% increase in the quality of the steak and the meat and the fish is like a 50% increase in what they'll give. And you at least have to have Maker's Mark.
You know, if the food is trash, instead of talking about the event, you're talking about the trash food, right? So that makes a lot of sense. I'm planning. I almost said their names, and then they would have been mad. But there's a very, very important group of folks coming to Chicago on the 24th of October. They'll be here during that week for their conference, and they were attempting to take 250 people on like synchronized tours, and that's one a logistical nightmare during rush hour in the city of Chicago. So I convinced them to let me take them all to the South Shore Cultural Center, which is on 71st and South Shore, and then I would do a virtual history or virtual tour of Chicago. And anyway, as we're planning the budget in that's like a stickler for me. Like, you know, we're going to taste the food before we serve them. Like, we're not serving trash food because, you know, once the food is good, you acknowledge it. You're like, oh man, this is great food. And then you pay attention to everything else. But when the food is trash, every other person you run into at the event, you're like, hey, did you eat? Yeah, that chicken was terrible, bro. Like, so you're right. You're spot on with that. And then you need open bar. This
is my rules. So no chicken. Just don't do it. Don't do chicken. Just stop. Avoid peanuts, pork, and shellfish. Avoid it. Too many people with allergies. And have a quality hot vegan option. And you will get maximum dollars.
And if you have past apps, 2 or 3 of them got to have something really fancy on them.
Like
fish eggs.
A quail. Like a quail egg. Has to be like a dollop of creme fraiche. Like it has to be, even if it's not expensive, it has to sound fancy. Sound fancy.
So
my rules.
Okay, we're here with Dilla, Sherman Dilla Thomas, and you can call in live if you have any questions. We're going to be talking about Chicago history and in life as the Dilla. You can call us at 773-763-WCPT. That's 773-763-9278. If you have any questions for Dilla or you want to add your 2 cents into the little history lesson we are going to spout forth today. Carla?
Yeah, Dilla, let me give you, I'm going to try to give you a proper intro.
Oh, not the bio.
Yes. I'm gonna try to keep it short and cute because your bio is way too daggone long.
Or you could just have him do his bio.
I'm one if you're listening and you're pretty good at doing bios and you get the social media handles, send me a message because she's correct. I let my kid do my bio, and, trying to be a good father, and sometimes you have to encourage them in ways where their skills isn't the best. So yeah, I'll if you don't mind, I'll do the bio because I don't want to hear that thing.
Give us here. No, I'm gonna start with a question. Then.
Oh yeah,
I'll start with my question. Marvel fan here. What is your superhero origin story?
That's a great way to. See, now you done teed me up. I'm feeling all powerful. I would say my superhero origin story is TikTok. sitting there with my then 8-year-old daughter and watching her enjoy TikTok, scroll, and then she hits a video about Chicago. And I saw the smile leave her face because the video was chronicling a Chicago gang shooting. And while that does happen in Chicago, I'm not one of those dudes that say we don't have issues. When we clicked the comments, it was like thousands of comments calling that Chicago history. That's Chicago history right there. And that's not Chicago history. And so I wanted my kids to know that, like, the time zones come from Chicago, or the chocolate brownie, right? Or every kind of civic organization you can think of pretty much finds their roots right here in Chicago. So I started posting those stories on TikTok, and then I would make all the kids in the house watch that video before they left for the day. And what I failed to realize is that I had clicked the option that said everyone gets to see this video. And so they were posted online. And so then, you got 1,000 views, then you get 5,000 views, then you get 10,000 views. I'm like, what is going on? Like, why are people watching me talk about history? And then it kind of like crashed, and it stayed like right there. And it takes me, especially back in those days, like 4, 5, 6 hours to make a 60-second video if it's going to be some fact checking and historical pictures. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not going to keep doing this. And my wife sat me down and she said, if 10,000 people came in the front room and heard you tell a Chicago story and just half of them left feeling a little better about Chicago, how would that make you feel? And I'm like, well, we need a bigger house because we ain't getting 10,000 nothing in here. But that made me tell another story. And the very next story I told was parking dibs. And then I told how we leave cool things in the streets when we were saving our parking, and how that started because of the 1967 blizzard. And that next morning, the Tribune was in my inbox, and Sun Times, and everybody wants to know, like, how does black dude with locks and Jordans know all this history? And so I would say that that's my superhero origin story, right? Just realizing that there was a space for accurate, I would say hip, right? Cool history storytelling, rooted in facts that, no one was really doing, particularly no one under 60, right?
Right.
And I don't have a tweed jacket with cool elbow patches, even though I want one. So, I would say that's my origin story. And from there, it's been like beyond bananas. I've been on the Today Show, been on the Kelly Clarkson Show. Honor of my life is the cool Jewish homies invited me to Yad Vashem, which is an international Holocaust museum, to tell the story of the black liberators. Bloomberg Philanthropy invited me to Amsterdam and City Labs to talk about that kind of stuff. So it's been insane, man. It's been really, really insane.
What's your favorite Chicago story?
That changes like the wind.
What's today? Today, like, you're like, this is it. This is the most. I'll ask it a different way. What is the most Chicago story that when you tell it anybody from Chicago, it's like, that's some Chicago ass-ish?
That's two, right? So maybe just super educated WCPT audience knows that Al Capone is the reason why we all have expiration dates on our milk. Because, yeah, so right, that don't get any more Chicago than that. So Al Capone and his brother had their hands in very many things across Chicago and across the country, but dairy and the production and distribution of dairy was one of them. And before them, the way you found out if milk was bad, it was either you smelled it or it lumped up. But there's a point when milk turns and it doesn't have a smell quite yet, right? And so one of Al Capone's relatives drank some milk and got very sick. When they took her to the doctor, it was determined, like, yeah, they drank some bad milk, and it pissed them off. Like, yeah, why don't we know when milk turns bad? And so they petitioned the city council, and the city council passed an ordinance that said if you sell milk in Chicago, you had to stamp with the expiration date, and the rest of the country followed suit. So we can thank Al Capone for expiration dates on milk. That's one. And then the other one is that a cool Irish dude by the name of Dr. Richard Lawler from Bridgeport performed the world's first organ transplant at Little Company of Mary Hospital right there on 95th in California. His patient and him, he was a Cook County doctor. His patient would come see him in Cook County, but then she got sick and couldn't make it down to Cook County. So they took her to Little Company of Mary, and he went down there and performed the world's first on-the-record organ transplant, which was a kidney transplant. And what I love about him is that he grew up in Bridgeport, but his old man was like, yeah, you're going to go to Wendell Phillips with the black dudes because they play sports better and you might get a scholarship. And so he went to Wendell Phillips, and which was Chicago's first black high school. And it's just this Irish guy with all this integrated history, right? He's the only white kid over there at the high school, and then he's partnering with a lot of black and minority BIPOC doctors at Cook County, and he's the reason why you can get a kidney transplant, though.
So before TikTok, you are working for the electric company.
Yep.
You got 7 children.
Yep.
And you're like, what, the guy who just knows everything about everything? But did you have any foresight into this portal, this multiverse that we ended up in together? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Did it really just like... Did you see it at all, or did it just happen?
It certainly just happened. My goal, was a union steward, making pretty decent wage because it's a union job. So, I could take the kids to Disney every 3 years, right? I could buy 1 pair of Jordans a month, and my wife not curse me out, right? So I'm living better than most of the black dudes I knew growing up, right? So I made it, right? I got a bungalow, you know what I mean? I paid my car note on time. I made it.
You have a bungalow?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you fit? Do you have the upstairs?
Oh, yeah, I'm ducking through the thing for sure. Yeah, I'm ducking through the door. But at the light company, you can retire at 58. So my plan was to retire and then drive a cab, and then whoever got in the back of my cab was going to learn Chicago history, whether they knew it or not. And if they reported that I talk too much, I don't need you. I got a pension anyway. Get out of my cab, right? So that was my goal, to just ride around and tell these stories that have been swimming in my head, as I learned them.
Where do you get what's your source? Where do you get your stuff?
So as I've gotten older, those things have changed, right? When I was a kid, I guess the best way to explain anything is a story. My dad's from the West Side, and his father bought a house on what today is 290 Expressway. But it got bought out via urban development, and he ended up underwater on the loan, because even though he got bought out eminent domain, they said it was blighted, even though it wasn't. Right. And so he ended up owning the bank, and he basically was paying a mortgage on the expressway.
Right.
And so my dad's family hated 290, and they just wouldn't take 290, right? Like, they just wouldn't do it. And so if you live on the south side, you're going to a Bulls game, you're going to take Ashland from 81st all the way to Madison, and then Madison over to the game. And what I noticed as a kid is, like, up Ashland or up Halsted, the language has changed, even though the architecture look exactly the same, right? A 2-flat's a 2-flat, a courtyard building's a courtyard building, but like you hit Cermak, it's starting to be in Mandarin or Chinese letters because you're in Chinatown. And you hit 18th, you're starting to see Spanish because you're in Pilsen. And if you cross over, you want to get a gyro, right? You start seeing Greek, right? And I had questions, and when he didn't have an answer, he just dragged me to the library, and he'd make me ask the librarian the answer. Then he would leave. Like, he'd probably get in trouble nowadays, but he would just drop me off there, man, and I'd be there for 5 hours, and maybe one day you only have 2 questions, so now you're just in the library all day, so you just keep reading and you keep collecting information. And then nowadays I steal my daughter's college login, and I check ProQuest, and I read a lot of if you have a PhD, you had to get challenged, right? And so if your dissertation or your thesis got approved, that means somebody took a red pen to it and fact-checked it already. So I can pretty much cite it because it's a first source, right? It's been thoroughly reviewed. So that's, I get a lot of information from there. But the best is, like, first-person stories. I started off as a light company as a meter reader. And in Chicago, right, particularly where I grew up, my dad, even though he's a cop, he'd be like, don't go to Bridgeport at night, bro. Or don't go to Mount Greenwood at night. And then I'm sure the Bridgeport kids were told not to go to Roseland, right, or don't go to Inglewood. The Lakeview kids were told not to go to North Lawndale. Right. But when you read the meters, you go everywhere, right? There's probably 8,000 blocks in Chicago. I've easily been on 6,000 of them. Very easily, no exaggeration. So the only people at home that let you in the backyard is the retirees, and they walk slow and they talk a lot. And so you learn, right? And then, why you got a phone booth in your backyard, bro? Oh, well, when the phone booths changed from 15 cents to a quarter, I took this one home. So now I'm learning history, right? And that was my job every day, backyard to backyard, learning.
I had a vision of the feature film. It opens with you on the bus, going up Ashland and asking your dad a question, and he takes you to the library, then you're in the library, and then we cut, and you're working for the electric company, "Yeah, I'm doing a meter reading." Chinese person comes out, says, "Yeah, come on back," and you start telling them about the history of Chinatown.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. It went both ways too, right? Sometimes the person who door knocked on wouldn't understand. They're in a historic space, and then sometimes I would walk in and they'd be very excited that they have this 100-year-old gray stone building, right? And so they want to start telling me about it, and that's how I learned. And I'm telling you, man, I don't know what my kids got on right now, and I just saw them, but if it ever had Chicago in the sentence, it just stuck. I don't know why.
So 2 things you said. One, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but black folks dropping their kids at the library was a thing. When I was growing up, I'm 80s, 90s, and you got dropped off.
Yep.
Or the library was a couple of blocks up. You got walked up there, and people would leave you in the library, go read, do a decimal system, learn it. But the other thing you talked about, can you talk about dibs, please?
Yes.
Please, because I had an argument with a non-Chicagoan about how silly and ridiculous we were for trying. It's a public street.
Oh, God.
You can't put your me a public street. It's like, have you ever dug 4 feet of snow out of a spot?
I think dibs are ridiculous, but here's what I think: people overdig out their spot.
So if you're, what's a good block, right? If you live near Loyola, right, on Sheridan or something like that, and it's all buildings, both sides of the street, you don't get dibs, right? It's like that's not a block that has dibs. Conversely, though, you live in Chatham on 82nd and Wabash, where it's all single-family houses, and Miss Parker parks her car right there every day for the last 20 years, and then she shovels out, and then you pull over there to visit your girlfriend. You should honor the dibs, right? And it didn't really start until before the blizzard, and that's like a perfect storm, right? Pre-blizzard, most Chicagoans had 1 car, if at all. So if you shoveled out, it didn't matter. It'd be spots on the block. By the time we hit 67, right, we're at this point where we're 2-car families. The mom of the house has a station wagon to run the kids around and do the groceries, and then the man of the house has his 67 muscle car, right? So parking becomes this premium. And again, to your point, if you shoveled out, it wouldn't matter if we were a little more neighborly, right?
Right.
But, there are people, particularly in neighborhoods that have single family homes, that ain't going to shovel themselves out. That you've seen it on the expressway. The dude got the packed snow on the back window, and as he's flying, it's flying back on your windshield. You think that dude's going to help his neighbor shovel out?
Absolutely not.
Right? So if the neighbor has shoveled themselves out. So anyway, to explain dibs, and now it's such a culturally cool thing because winter before last, right? That dude, he wet his blue jeans and then set them outside so that it'll freeze standing up, and then he put his jeans standing up in the middle of the parking spot, right?
So awesome.
Or like someone will take an ironing board. Now people do over shovel, right? Like you got a 2-door and you're saving space for a minivan, like that ain't okay, right? But I do think it's uniquely Chicago. I hear that they do it in Philadelphia a little bit too, but I enjoy just seeing what's put in the parking spots.
My favorite one I saw was somebody put an entire black nativity. I live in South Shore. Somebody put the whole black nativity in their spot. It was there. It was great. I was like, okay.
Yeah, and 1 inch of snow, no dibs, but 6 inches or above, dibs is fair.
And it's interesting too, right? Because Philadelphia is like the other city that goes like a little extra hard on everything. I would say Boston too. It's like these northern, old school cities that have serious territorial claims.
Yeah, very much. Very much.
Okay, so we thought what we would do. We have a little time because we just have one guest today, and he is a historian, as you have heard. And what we thought we would do is a special walk through the history of Chicago, led by Dilla.
Well, I dig that. I don't think I've ever done that before. So
we got about 20 minutes. So.
Oh man, yeah. And this, boy, if you're from the South Side and you get invited here, leave early. It's a nice drive. So I'm definitely happy to do it. I always start with the land acknowledgement, right? That this place we call Chicago in the Chicagoland area first. belong to the indigenous Native American homies who we jacked the land from, and we should give some of it back to them. But having said that, this what we call Chicago had the Ojibwe, had the Illiwek, which is where Illinois gets its name from, the Potawatomi tribes of Miami, and the Algonquin who name us. And Chicago comes on the scene because these two French white dudes, Marquette and Joliet, first two white dudes on record to kind of canoe the entirety of the Mississippi. And they're looking for the Great Lakes. And so they found, run into some Algonquin homies who tell them go by the S Chicago, meaning go by where the smelly onions grow. And they wrote that on a map, and we've been Chicago ever since. But they don't stay, right? They pass right through, they jump in, they find the Great Lakes, they map them, they keep going. First person to stay is John Baptiste Point Dusab. Dusab is half French, half Haitian. So his dad was a white French dude, mom was a Haitian lady. He lost his mom pretty early in his life, and so he travels with his dad, who some historians refer to as a French pirate. And they end up in Louisiana at the time, which was a French territory. And Dusab decides to stay. And while he's down there, he runs into a trading liaison group from what we now call Peoria. So if your favorite car is a Pontiac GTO like mine is, Pontiac's named after the indigenous Native American Chief Pontiac of Peoria. And Chief Pontiac has a great nephew. And that great nephew meets Dusab, and he's like, dang, Dusab's this handsome black dude, sort of like myself. But unlike me, he's a linguist, right? Because when you grow up on a pirate ship, if you don't know English, then the redcoats are going to jump on your boat and take all your stuff, right? If you don't know Spanish, then conquistadors are going to jump on your boat and take up all your stuff. So he learns all these various languages, and the Native Americans realize that he'll be the greatest trading partner ever for them because he can break the language barriers for them. So they take him back to Peoria. He marries Kithiwatha. Her English name is Catherine. They continue up to Chicago, and they establish a trading post. And it's his ability to speak these languages that grows the trading post, because formerly, right, if the fur traders from Quebec came through and you couldn't speak French, well, there's no trade to be done. But he has that in spades, right? He can speak Spanish and get various fruits from Florida that don't naturally grow here. So it's his trading post that establishes Chicago, so much so that he got kidnapped during the Revolutionary War by the Redcoats. They take him back to Detroit, and because he married above his station like you and I did, his wife ran the shop, and she kept it going. And then finally we get to about the early 1800s, and a guy by the name of John Kinsey and John Lalime. Some say buy him out, I say force him out. And they forced him back down to first Peoria, then Quincy, then I believe he's buried in Cahokia. And then we have Fort Dearborn, which is the military installation. The reason you call Northwestern Illinois, because Fort Dearborn was the northwestern point of the United States before we did the Mississippi-Louisiana Purchase thingamabob, right? And so they're a military fort, and so we have to surrender that fort. We refer to that as the Fort Dearborn Massacre. And even that's like a misnomer, right? When you surrendered the fort back in those days, you were supposed to leave the munitions, the molasses, and the whiskey inside of the fort. You raise the white flag, you leave with your life. But when the white settlers found out that they were surrendering to Native Americans, they was like, we ain't leaving them nothing. They set the munitions on fire. They poured out the molasses. They poured out the whiskey. Then they left. So feeling disrespected, the Native Americans chased them down to about 33rd in the lakefront, and they massacred them. So that's the Fort Dearborn Massacre.
What year is that?
This is 1812. Right, and so then we fast forward. So we leave, the fort's abandoned until after the end of the War of 1812, and then we reclaim Fort Dearborn, and then it becomes a trading post with, mostly with John Kinsey. And then we have Chicago become a town, 1833. Then we become a city in 1837. And then we start to get immigrants from everywhere. We had, although we passed the reason why you call Indian Boundary Park, right? That park is located on Rogers Boulevard, and that was the line that the Native Americans couldn't cross anymore after the Treaty of Chicago in 1832.
And there was two treaties in Chicago, right? Which a lot of people don't know.
Yep. And so
Billy Caldwell.
Yeah. I was just going to say Saginash, right? They hate it when you don't pronounce it correctly over there. They get you. Them Sherman Hegwish. Don't play with their pronunciations. But Billy Caldwell, quote unquote, sold out the Native Americans, although he tries to redeem himself after that treaty. But then, we start to anglicize ourselves, right? All these Yankees, if you will, right? So our first mayor is William B. Ogden. That's what Ogden's named for. Second mayor is John Wentworth. And there's some New York guys, and they start to bring that New York money to Chicago. And then we grow like really, really slowly. Then we have that fire, right? 1871. Please stop saying that O'Leary's cow started the fire. It's very, very disrespectful to the Irish homies here. It's a racial slur, actually. It was a way of saying that the Irish people are so dumb they don't know that you're not supposed to have a lit flame by livestock. What's an absolute fact is that the Chicago Police Department and the fire department had on their reports that they had to knock on Miss O'Leary's door to wake her up for the fire. So you're telling me she started a fire in the barn and went back to sleep like, somebody else to take care of it? No. So don't say that. She didn't start the fire. And another thing, since I'm running my mouth, is none of the O'Leary kids or any other people with the last name of O'Leary for like 30 years could get a job because they blamed the fire on the O'Learys, right? So we have the 1871 fire, where most people think that
which is hilarious. I just have to say, because the Chicago fire is the greatest thing that happened to Chicago, because this is how we got like a mapped out city that was thought through and not backwards as hell like all the East Coast cities that are 300 years old.
Yeah, very much so. But even I got to give it to their credit. So even in 1833, they put alleys.
Yeah.
Right. We had alleys as far back as 1833 when we were just a town. So then we have the Great Chicago Fire, 1871. We have another fire in 1874 that burns out what we call Prince's Row. We had African American and Jewish Americans living here at that time. The Jewish homies go to the West Side or the West Side. They start to lay out North Lawndale. The brothers go to South Side, start to lay out Bronzeville. Chicago's first neighborhood is Bridgeport. That's the first neighborhood in Chicago. Second one will be Pilsen, and that's because the dudes living in Bridgeport kind of outgrow it, and they start to move to Pilsen because that's where the McCormick Reaper Works and other steel mills were. So then we, of course, we did have a Civil War history that predates the Great Chicago Fire. There was a Confederate prisoner of war camp on the South Side. Camp Douglas had 60,000 Confederate prisoners, but that doesn't get talked about in our history because that area was the town of Hyde Park. We didn't start annexing our neighbors until 1889. So we got the fire 1871, fire 1874. And then there's grumblings that Chicago may get the World's Fair for 1893. And then Congress, it took a congressional vote in Washington. Congress approved Chicago to hold the fair. And so then our neighbors want to be a part of Chicago because they knew that it was going to be a crazy tax revenue, right? So Lakeview was not part of Chicago. Jefferson Township was not part of Chicago. The town of Hyde Park, what we call the South Side, was Lake Township. And in 1889, all those municipalities vote themselves into Chicago. And then that's when we become like the Chicago that we know today. In the middle of all that, we come up with this thing called the border trade, where we invent futures trading or commodities trading. That comes from Chicago as well. And then we still was doing pretty good, but then World War I turns us into this like very segregated, messed up place because the Great Migration starts about 1917, and what was formerly, so before that, right, be a couple black dudes work at the factory, but the Polish, Italian, and Irish dudes mostly had all the jobs. But then they get drafted first. They're a little slow to draft African Americans, and when they do, it's only to like clean up stuff. They didn't really want to fight in war. And so that created this pocket of jobs that was being filled by the great migrators, right? So formerly, like, take the stockyards, right? The Chicago Union Stockyards, where we butchered lots of animals. That was maybe the #1 employer of Chicagoans behind George Mortimer Pullman's train car company. And so if you're a black dude and you're a butcher in the South, you're pretty damn good. You know, one, you had to be, because if you messed up a cut, it'd be some physical repercussions. But secondly, you got to be like a really cold butcher to leave fat on a pig's knuckle, so you could take pig's feet home, right? To leave meat on the pig nose, right? These are all things that they knew how to cut it just right to where you could leave some meat on it, right? You got to be cold as hell to pull out an intestine without breaking it, to turn that into chitlins. And so when they're coming to the South and taking jobs, the business owners like, oh man, forget the union. These brothers is good, and I only pay them 50 cents on the dollar. And so when World War I ends, that's the leverage that they use, right? And then because of that pushes us into the race riot of 1919, and that's when we really get segregated, like super segregated. So much so that the 77 community areas that we love so much, they're etched in segregation because they all follow the boundaries and borders of the restrictive racial covenants, and then they're named and numbered by University of Chicago sociologists, right? But in between that, a lot of dope stuff happened too, right? Early 1900s, late 1800s, cool dude by the name of Montgomery Ward comes up with mail order catalogs, right, which is basically the Amazon of today. He invents this concept called COD, cash on delivery, right? And then Sears Roebuck and Company is invented, and they do amazing stuff too for the country. You know, you can get a house dropped off on a lot via Sears.
Right.
You know, they're my second favorite Chicagoan ever ran Sears for forever, right? Julius Rosenwald, super cold cat. So we start to, you know, be really industrialized. But then, like everything, the Rust Belt starts to change in the 50s. I don't give Richard J. Daley a lot of compliments, right? It's just like, one, my daddy would come down from heaven and smack me, but two, he wasn't that nice of a guy. But one thing he did do in the 50s was decide that he was going to make Chicago a white-collar town. Places like Cleveland, places like Gary, places like Cincinnati were still throwing tons of money trying to save the factories. And the EPA was becoming a thing, and they were saying you can't save these factories because they're, you know, killing everybody. And so instead of chasing that, he decides that he's going to, in the middle of the night, come up with a deal for what's the name? The cool, it starts with a P down there. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on the cool building that's right there on Randolph. It was the first high-rise built after the Great Depression. Prudential
Yes.
Towers, right? So in the middle of the night with lawyers, they secretly start to work out these things called air rights, right? And because the Illinois Central train tracks own the land and they own the rights above the track, right? Air rights. So Daley's smart dude, man. He went to law school at night.
And his son, in the middle of the night, closed down the next field.
Yep.
Okay, what happened next? We got about 8 minutes left, and you got about 100 years to go.
Look, right? So, you know, like I said, he decides that he's going to save the city by becoming a white-collar town. So Prudential Towers gets built, and at the same time, he also starts to work on Marina City, or the Corn Cobs, because the interstate highways came, and a lot of the union workers were taking those interstate highways to these new things called suburbs, even though Chicago invents the suburbs, but that's a whole other conversation for another day.
Bertrand Goldberg, shout out.
Yeah, I love me some Bertrand Goldberg. I was born in Old Prentice. I can't believe they knocked that.
Our daughter was like the last week of Old Prentice. If she was born a week later, she would have been in the
Lurie's,
new.
yeah.
And then, you know, whenever they have a new hospital, you don't want to be born there for the first couple months.
Oh,
you want to be born in the old one.
That's for sure. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. So then we build the Marina City, and it's designed to keep the union dudes to live and work downtown. But in between that, a lot of cool stuff, man. Jane Addams and Ida B. Wells helped bring kindergarten to Chicago. In the early 1920s, Chicago invents the first ever juvenile court system. And it ain't to like lock up the shorties. It's because we didn't have the child labor laws that we did at the time. And so it offered a court for kids to sue the bosses over the paychecks that they were, you know.
Right.
Then, you know, also, right, we got Al Capone and them doing their thing during Prohibition, but also black folks on the south side of Chicago invent the lottery in the 30s and 40s with policy and number running, right? That is the birth of what we call the lottery system in this country. Sal Alinsky is this cool Jewish dude that lived in back of the yards, and he's the first one to tell the meat packers unions, hey, if y'all want to win these strikes, y'all might want to let the black dudes in the union, and then that way they can't use them against you as scabs, right? My man Enrique Fermi split blitzing at them in the 1940s. We have the Manhattan Project here in Chicago. Shout out University of Chicago for sucking, because the year before, I don't mean, well, we'll talk about that later, but they had a football team once, and the football team lost 80-3. And so the president was like, yeah, we're not doing this football thing anymore, which created all this available space, right? So that's why the Manhattan Project could take place here, because what was formerly the stadium and the equipment room and all this other stuff could be converted very easily to these science labs, right? So that happens here. Then also I skipped the World's Fair. You can't skip the World's Fair or they're going to say you're not a historian. So yes, Chicago had the first serial killer, H.H. Holmes, and Devil in White City, right? I mentioned Al Capone helped us get expiration on milk, but Chicago's so layered with so many awesome historical amazing things, right? Out of that Iroquois theater fire that occurred in, I believe, 1906, we get the push bar exit doors on buildings, because the guy that ran the Iroquois theater will lock the door don't lock the doors, Tony, when your shows are going, okay? In order for people would sneak in the show when it was going on, so he would lock the doors, right? So no one can do that. But then when the fire happened, no one could get out of the building. So that's why, Chicago helps pioneer push bar exit doors, right? Chicago, like I said, we pioneered the world's first open heart surgery on record, right, at Providence Hospital, America's first all-black hospital on the South Side. And then even that, right, Rogers Park then and now always maintained this very multicultural type of feel. It today has the most urban indigenous Native Americans than any other city, so they were leaving their thumbprint on there, So we'd be here all day talking about the history of the city and the things that we innovate. So it was really cool, man.
Dilla, talk about your bus company and your tours and where we can get to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm sure you're gonna ask me why that's my username, but my username online is the number 6 FIGGA_DILLA. So you can find me there. You can also go to ChicagoMahogany.com. That's the name of our tour company. We have a 50-passenger bus. We take you through neighborhoods. We take you to North Lawndale. We show you the old Sears and Roebuck Company campus. We take you to Stone Temple, which used to be a Jewish synagogue, and they have on its stage a pew where the Queen of Romania and Dr. King has both sat, right? We take you through Pilsen. Most people think Pilsen is the first Mexican neighborhood in Chicago. It ain't. South Chicago is the first Mexican neighborhood in Chicago. Pilsen is Pilsen because Pilsen was the capital of Czech Republic back in the day, right? And there were a lot of Bohemian Czechs that come to Chicago, and they lay out Pilsen. So we tell you that story. We point out, Chicago common brick. We tell you where the limestone comes from, but we also, explain who the people are on the brown signs, right? So in Chicago, brown signs are honorary street signs named after cool people that did stuff in Chicago. So we educate you to that. I will pick you up downtown. I'm not doing a downtown tour unless you got 5 figures that you just want to waste your money, and then I still probably not going to do it, because the part of the thing that I think is the problem with Chicago is that we've ignored certain spots of the city, and then you wonder why people act a certain way. When you ignore it, you act out, right? And so that I'm doing my part, not ignoring them. We do South Side tours, we do West Side tours, we do North Side tours, we do over East tours, but we ain't doing no downtown tours. We'll just pick you up down there.
Where's your brown street sign going to be?
Man, so if anyone's listening, in 2016, City Council passed an ordinance that said you got to kick the bucket in order to get an honorary street sign, because what was happening is all the churches were nominating their pastors for
the Reverend Deacon Doctor.
Yeah, so it's so many Reverend Deacon Doctor signs everywhere that they said from now on we're going to, which sucks, because, there are cool Chicagoans that should get their flowers while they're on this other side of the dirt. But
end of the century, where are they going to put yours?
I grew up on 81st and Troop. I would like it to go there.
All right, you heard that, people of the future. Do the right thing.
No, change that so I can see it. You just wait till I'm at 85 or something. You ain't got to do it when it ain't doing me no good after I kick the bucket. I want to take my grandkids probably and see it.
Tell everybody about all the the swag you can get at Midway and O'Hare.
Midway and O'Hare.
Multi-medium. You're going digital,
goodness.
buses, and airplane swag.
Your shirt, what does it say?
It says everything dope about America comes from Chicago.
And it's true.
It's an absolute fact, man. So you can find them on our website, but also at Midway and at O'Hare. I don't have any shame in saying that we use the black card very, very hard to get in there. We called the people who are in charge of concessions at the airport, and I was like, hey, can you give me a list of all the black and brown vendors that are in the airport? And they was like, would you like to be a vendor in the airport? Heck yeah, I would. We certainly would. But anyway, the other part of that is that, like, you know, whether you're on Mars or Mississippi or Maine, when you hear Chicago, you immediately think negative. Right now, someone's listening to us in the car, on a car radio, and the Galvin brothers invented car radios here in Chicago. And today we call Galvin Brothers Motorola, right? If you got your cell phone, the first commercial cell phone was used 1981, Chicago, right? The chocolate brownie, Chicago. Burrito sandwich, Chicago. Italian beef, Chicago. Euros, right?
Okay, this is what we're going to do. Speed round. Carla and I are going to alternate asking you a quick question, and you have to give us a quick answer.
All right, bet.
All right? I'll just start with an easy one. Best pizza in Chicago.
Italian Fiesta.
I was just going to say deep dish or thin crust.
I ain't a tourist. Thin crust, tavern style, cutting squares.
Favorite bus ride?
The number 9 route, Ashland. It'll take you from Howard Street all the way to 95th Street.
Favorite train.
Don't tell the Southsiders, but I love the Blue Line.
Boxers or briefs?
Boxer briefs.
Favorite pair of Jordans.
Oh, you dirty. I thought we liked each other. Oh, man. Jordan 4s.
Favorite actress?
Ooh, that's equally dirty. Nichelle Nichols. Lieutenant Uhura.
A Jordan or Scottie Pippen.
I'm sorry, but I'm not voting for no Pippen.
Common, Chance, or Kanye?
I know Chance, so Chance.
Oh, shoot. Do another one.
Best Italian beef?
Ooh, I'm going to say anywhere that doesn't take debit and you got to scream through bulletproof glass.
Best Polish.
Jim's Original for sure.
Sharks, Harold's, or Remus?
That's bad.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm going to go with the Harold's Chicken on 87th and Sangamon.
North side, south side.
Man. South side for sure.
Lake or pool?
Oh, I'm going to go pool.
Favorite old school mall.
Favorite old school mall would be I was gonna say Evergreen Plaza, but that ain't in Chicago, so we'll go Brickyard.
Okay.
Bears, Cubs, Bulls, Sox, Hawks.
All of them are breaking my heart right now. I would say just because I'm a black dude, right? We probably identify more with the Bulls, then Bears, then Hawks, then Sox, then Cubs.
Do we have a phone call? We have a caller.
What?
We barely have any time, but if you're our caller, welcome to the show. You're live with Dilla and Collaboration Radio.
Hey, I got to tell you, this is a really interesting conversation, and I wish your guest, I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name, but I was doing the history. If he would touch on, at some time, toys and games, all the toy companies, all the toys that anybody played with basically came from Chicago, whether people realize it. And then also to touch on Southwater Market, how it was the hub of all fruits and vegetables that came into the Midwest.
Thank you so much for calling. We only have 2 minutes left. Dilla,
I know.
Dilla, anything about the toys or games?
Well, he's absolutely correct. If you watch any of those shows like Pickers or any of that other stuff on the History Channel, you'll see that most of them were manufactured here in Chicago. Particularly all the cast iron toys were made right here locally in Chicago. A number of board games find their origins here in Chicago. So, I really, really appreciate it from that. And then talking about Southwater Market, I don't got to say a thing. I want you to go to 14th and Morgan, and you'll find a mural that tells you what's now the University Commons, was formerly the Southwater Market, and that's what pushes the Mexican American homies to Pilsen. They lived in the Southwater Market and worked there too, and then we started expanding and creating UIC that pushed them into Pilsen.
Folks, not everything on TikTok is a vapid waste of time. Go check out Dilla's TikTok and Chicago Mahogany bus tours, and I hope you learned a little bit. I know I did.
I learned so much.
Dilla's one of our new favorite people here at Collaboration, and we'd love to do something together one day. Dilla, I think that could be cool.
Yeah. Looking very much forward to it. That's for sure.
Thank you so much, Dilla. This Collaboration Radio is supported by Social Innovation Group of Chicago. Social Innovation Group provides coaching, consulting, and training focused on the human side of enterprise. They service clients across a broad spectrum. To learn more about Social Innovation Group and start a conversation about your needs, visit www.drmarcusrobinson.com. And that is our show.
Hey, Dilla, you want to freestyle over the beat on the way out?
That is, you know what? And then I'm gonna lose my black card if I don't try.
Your black card can never be revoked.
Well, I appreciate that. Instead of freestyling, though, I do encourage you to come take a tour. My dad told me that a rising tide raises all ships. So the better we look at all Chicago neighborhoods, the better we'll look at Chicago as a whole. ChicagoMahogany.com or the number 6FIGGA_DILLA.
Six-figure Dilla.
If you don't know, now you know.
This is a great show. Next Saturday, 4 p.m. Central, same bad time, same bad channel.
Who's our guest next week?
Martine Green Rogers, Dr. Martine, who...
Yeah.
Yes.
The preceding program, Collaboration